Warning, this podcast may be disturbing to some listeners. Due to the graphic nature, listener discretion is advised. Welcome from wherever you are. This is the Demon Inside podcast. I am your host, John Venom. If you would like to review another episode of the Demon Inside, you can go to Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and any podcast platform. And please, don't forget to subscribe and rate us with 5 stars. A new episode will come out once a week. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And welcome back to the Demon Inside. Hello, my Demon Insiders, and welcome back to the Demon Inside. I'm your host, John Venom, and today, before I begin my episode, I would like to take some time to read a comment that I received from Jacob Bernard. Now, Jacob Bernard is the uncle of Matthew Bernard, and I did a show on him a few episodes back. Matthew Bernard was a young teenage kid who killed his family and ran off and was naked and started to try to choke and bite a groundskeeper. Well, I relate this back to 3 other episodes that I had covered, which was Austin Haroff, Rudy Eugene, and Anison Joseph. If you haven't heard any of those, I suggest you go back and listen to those. But Matthew actually heard his nephew's episode, and he sent me a comment, and I'm going to read that now. Now, keep in mind, he sent me 4 answers that I didn't know, that I wasn't sure, and I said on the podcast. So I'll read those to you as well. But this is how he starts, and I quote, "I'm Matthew's uncle, and I gotta say, you're not too off from your research. Keep up the journalism." Number 1, Papa wasn't around at the time Matthew killed Nana and Emily. He was on the road looking for Matthew. No one knew where he was. It wasn't until Aunt Rachel heard the gunshots and called 911. Did she see Nana on the ground, and then she saw Papa, and they went and checked and saw Nana had been shot. I feel so bad for him. Number 2, Matthew had narcolepsy and capilepsy, so he couldn't sleep like we could. He basically didn't sleep at all, which is why I believe he snapped. He saw demons and had constant nightmares about them too, and they were always talking to him. Number 3, he's had 9 mental evaluations now and is somewhat competent to continue with the court process, and hopefully we finally get everything over with. He was also diagnosed with schizophrenia and is finally starting to come back to reality. It's been a rough 5 years. Number 4, he didn't have any drugs in his system, nor does he truly have an idea what they are or even where to get them. Matthew grew up surrounded by people who love him. Nana wouldn't even let us continue to watch a movie or a show if the word stupid or even shut up came up, if that tells you anything. He was the representation of a golden child and never did any harm to others, nor did he even have outbursts. He was always filled with joy and fun to be around. The continuation of his letter says, I don't hate Matthew for what he's done because I know it wasn't him. I believe he was possessed at the time due to all I've seen with everything, and from someone who grew up with him, I can confidently say that wasn't Matthew when he did that. I've seen him multiple times and have talked to him when I can to show my support for him. Yeah, a lot of people call me crazy for being there for him and seeing him, but I know with all my heart that when everything happened, that wasn't Matthew. Yes, his body physically did the killings, but mentally, I know it wasn't him. And because of that, I will continue to support Matthew. Anyway, I can because I still love him, and that's what Nana and Emily would have wanted. I miss them and hope one day we can put this all behind us. I don't wish Matthew death or anything like that, but I'd like to see him finally be able to stay stationed instead of constantly being moved around due to court proceedings. It's a lot to wrap anyone's head around, but sometimes with situations like this, you have to think outside the box and look at the direction of everything to see where the truth really lies, and most people can't see that. End quote. Jacob, first, I'd like to thank you for sending this comment in. It really means a lot to me and my show. It shows that there are people out there that believe that demons exist. And as hard as it is to acknowledge that, it's even harder to see when it takes effect on a family member. I think, Jacob, you are a brave person, loving, trusting, and honest. And I think people that are calling you crazy, we don't believe that. You're not crazy. From all my demon insiders and myself, we think you're a special person who loves and cherishes his family. And we send you nothing but good hopes and prayers and God's love. Again, I want to thank you for being brave and sending this to me. And we will give you the support you need or want. We're here for you. Again, thank you for sending the comments. I wait to hear from you if possible. I'd really like to know how Matthew and you are doing. So with that, we'll continue with the demon inside. Today's episode, we are talking about Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo.
30 miles from his Brownsville home, Mauricio Rodriguez stared in disbelief at the Santa Elena Ranch, at a one-room shack filled with candles and other reminders of the devil worship that ended the life of 21-year-old Mark Kilroy, one other unnamed U.S. citizen, and 10 Mexicans. Outside, a scorched cauldron still holds the remains of what authorities say is human brain matter, animal parts, and blood.
Yeah, I'm shocked with what happened over here, and I never believed it.
So far, authorities have unearthed 9 shallow graves, still filled, some of them with human hair, skin, and body parts. They believe 2 more young victims remain buried here, that Mark Kilroy spent 12 hours on the ranch before dying.
They wrapped heavy duct tape around his eyes and forehead and face and his head. They assured him that he was not going to be harmed, that he was not in danger. They fed him some bread and water, we understand, and then one of them ultimately came up behind him with the machete and hit him across the back of the head with it.
Authorities say that the devil worship and human sacrifice practiced here may be a brand of voodoo or black magic that comes from the Caribbean and Cuba, and that the padrino or godfather is a Cuban still on the loose.
We've been led to believe he's from Mexico City, has a residence in Mexico City. We've been led to believe that he has a family in Miami, Florida. We were told that he's of Cuban extraction, he's about 40 years of age, and that he periodically travels to Brownsville.
From a balcony at federal police offices in Matamoros, not far from where Kilroy disappeared, authorities paraded 4 suspects who admit to cult involvement. 2 who say they helped abduct Mark Kilroy on March 14th as he celebrated spring break in Matamoros. 1 bared his shoulder to reveal 6 ceremonial marks, 1 for each person he said he had killed. The suspects say that at one point Mark Kilroy almost escaped his fate at Santa Elena, that he got away but was recaptured by this group of Satanists who believe that the souls of their dead would protect their drug smuggling. Shelley Koffler, Channel 5 News, near Brownsville.
So, Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo is a serial killer who was born in Miami, but actually grew up in certain parts of South America. So let's get into this. On November 1st, 1962, Adolfo was born to a single mother named Delia. Delia was a widow and a Cuban immigrant. When he was 6 months, she took him to a polaro, which is like a priest in the Palo Mayombe religion. Now, for those of you, which I'm one, didn't know what Palo Mayombe is, it's a religion that centers on the spirits of the dead and often involves dark practices such as grave robbing and the use of human and animal remains. Palo Mayombe is sometimes used to inflict misfortune on enemies such as insanity, divorce, or death. Now, the religion itself doesn't encourage criminal activity, but the members can go 2 ways. They can be Christian Palo Mayombe, which is following God, doing good, praying to angels and saints, or they could be unbaptized Palo Mayombe, which is basically doing evil, doing harm, and worshiping Cariapembe. Now, Cariapembe is like the devil in Christianity or in Catholicism. And Cariapembe is also known as the devourer of souls. We've heard that before, remember? So the polaro looked at Adolfo when he was 6 months, and he told his mother, Delia, that Adolfo was going to do great things. And he offered to become his teacher and spiritual advisor. And his mother, of course, accepted. So 6 months later, when he was 1 year old, his mother took him to Puerto Rico to broaden his knowledge. She got married to a man there, and Adolfo was chosen to be an altar boy in the Catholic religion. But his mother was also practicing Santeria. Now, Santeria is another religion, kind of like Palo Mayombe, only because it calls for animal sacrifices. So as he was growing up, his mother was teaching him how to sacrifice animals for their religion. Eventually, Adolfo would accept the fact that animal sacrifices were a part of religion. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now it's time for the shout out of the week. And today I have a couple of shout outs. First one is to Russell, and he works at the Max Car Rental. And we were talking about the podcast, and I was telling him about the 3 cases that I had and with Austin Haroff, Rudy Eugene, and Anderson Joseph. And he suggested that I look into the geographical locations of the rivers that flow through each and every one of those killings. So that's something to think about, and I'm probably going to start doing that eventually. But right now I just kind of got caught up with everything. So thank you for that suggestion, Russell. Then I also have Tyro and Davinsky, and they're a couple that I took to the VFW. Sweet couple, liked them very much. But I honestly don't think they're going to listen to this show. They were kind of freaked out when I played for them. But I'd like to send Tyro and Davinsky and also Russell a shout out for this week. All right, guys, back to the show. And welcome back to The Demon Inside. In 1972, when Adolfo was 10, his mother moved back to Miami. His godfather, who had said that he was going to do great things, immediately started teaching Adolfo the ways of Palo Mayombe. He was teaching him how to read cards, which is telling the future. He was teaching him how to heal. He was teaching them practices in pretty much witchcraft and that kind of culture. Now, his padrino, or his bolero, his godfather, had a nganga. Now, this nganga is kind of like a altar in the Palo Mayombe religion. And in this altar, which is actually a cauldron, it's supposed to communicate with spirits and deities. In their belief, for them to invoke the spirits of the dead, they have to use human skulls along with other human body parts from that person. They would invoke the spirit to do their bidding for personal gain, protection, or revenge. This was often used when a criminal would die. They would go and bury his body, use the pieces in the nganga, and his spirit was supposed to be controlled by the polaro. Sometimes it would work because these spirits were okay with it. Sometimes it wouldn't. But the faith that you have in Palo Mayombe decided if you could control or not control. Now, remember, Adolfo was the chosen one. This is going to come to play a little bit later. So let's continue. So this nganga, when his polaro was trying to teach him at 10 years old, he would walk him into a little shed that had no windows, and Adolfo was not allowed to look upon the nganga, so he would have a blindfold on whenever he would enter that room. Now, the nganga was supposed to be so powerful that if he would have looked upon it with his eyes, he would have been killed immediately by the spirits or by the deities. Eventually, he started saying that he would receive his own nganga when he got older. And his godfather agreed with him. He said, "You're going to have the best, most powerful nganga that anybody has ever had." While he was teaching him his philosophies, he told Adolfo, it's okay to work with drug dealers, it's okay to work with killers, it's okay to work with any of these people. He goes, but let the non-believers kill themselves with drugs. we will profit from their foolishness. And also told him, don't ever use drugs. If a spirit enters your body and sees that you are unclean, the spirit will kill you. Now this affected him for his whole life. He even killed his members whenever they used drugs. So when Adolfo was 14, he started displaying psychic powers. And one of these psychic powers was reading into the future. He actually predicted a few months before President Reagan was shot that President Reagan would be shot, but he would survive. In 1983, when he turned 20, he decided to move to Mexico City, where his padrino, his godfather, told him to go because there was no Palo Mayombe in Mexico. And this was a good time to put himself in there to gather a following. So when he got there, he started doing card readings, readings of the future. He started doing limpias, which is cleansings. And what that means is if you're cursed or you have bad luck or anything like that, he'll clean you so that you can have better luck, things like that. So while he was there, he eventually met two guys, Martin Quintanilla Rodriguez and Omar Chuy Orilla Ochoa. And these two guys eventually became his lovers and his disciples. When he was 21, he moved back to Miami, where his polaro told him that he was of age and he would prepare him to receive his own naganga and prepare him for the initiation to become a polaro. So during his initiation, on the first day of his initiation, he selected Cariapambe as his own spirit guide. So Adolfo's polaro blindfolded him and asked him questions. And for his final question, he asked him, "Are you sure this is what you want?" Now, this was after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so many weeks of cleansing. There's a whole thing, a spiritual cleaning that goes with this, but I'm not going to say because I don't want people trying to mimic this. I've received a lot of weird emails and messages that I'm kind of worried somebody will try to do this. But let's continue. So, when he asked Adolfo if he was ready for this, he said, "There is no going back. You will lose your soul." Adolfo responded by saying, and I quote, "My soul is dead. I have no God." End quote. His polaro then carved markings into Adolfo's shoulders, unique to him. So he was a polaro in his own right now. He took off the blindfold. After 10 years, he had his own naganga. So shortly thereafter, he moved back to Mexico City and went on his way to charm wealthy drug dealers, helping them schedule shipments and meetings on the basis of his predictions. Of course, for a price. He offered magic that would make dealers and their hitmen invisible to police, bulletproof against their enemies. He had a lot of followers that were judges, police officers, narcotics officers, influential people, and drug dealers. Now, his followers went beyond just the reading of cards and the philosophies of Palo Mayombe. They started worshiping him as a minor god in his own right. He was their living conduit to the spirit world. I believe this is where he loses control. Not that he ever had any, because I believe that during that ceremony that he becomes a Polaro, the demon got inside of him. He welcomed it in. Now, this deity or a demon was taking more and more control, but Adolfo was also taking control, because Adolfo felt like a god. So eventually Adolfo started making more grand rituals, ceremonies. He started to give his members the Polaro rites as well, like he had, but they weren't doing it in the traditional sense like he did. He spent his whole life learning. They were doing it within a few months. I think this was a way for him to get control of them faster. Now, because of that, they had to faithfully and loyally be with Adolfo. So when Adolfo started using real bodies from the cemetery, he figured that it wasn't going to be enough for some of these drug dealers. They were paying huge money for what they called their spiritual father. So he started killing people. A lot of them were drug dealers. A lot of them were drug rivals to the dealers he was protecting. Eventually, he got to the point where he thought he deserved a partnership in the drug syndicate. Well, they refused him. And he ends up taking revenge on that family. Later on, after he kills like 6 members of the family and uses them for his Naganga, he ends up with another drug family. And so this guy starts doing these rituals and starts telling people that if you're not in this religion, then you're going to be sacrificed. But if you betray this religion, you're going to be sacrificed. He was becoming a god on earth that was vengeful, and everybody needed to please him. Eventually, he meets Sarah Aldrete, who becomes his madrina, which is his partner. She becomes like the mother figure of this religion. She in herself has a whole different story. If you want, you can watch Netflix. She even talks about how she had seen his face change into a demonic face. It's really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not on Netflix, it's on Max. So if you get a chance, look at it on Max. So one day, his members go out and find sacrificial people, and they bring them back to Adolfo, where he is going to kill them on his ranch. And this sacrifice didn't plead for his life, didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't do anything. So it didn't feel Adolfo's need for his Naganga. So he told them, his followers, to go out and find an American. Now in 1989 was spring break near Mexico, and the town of Brownsville, which is actually a few hours from where I live, and it had made big news. His followers went out and grabbed a young man named Mark Kilroy. They ended up sacrificing Mark Kilroy and using his body parts for the Naganga. A few weeks later, one of the followers was driving by a checkpoint where the police were at. He figured, because he was protected, that they wouldn't see him. And of course, they could see him. They grabbed him. They started questioning him. He started talking about the drugs and the killings. He led them to where they had been killing people. They ended up catching other members of this cult group, and they ended up finding Mark Kilroy's pieces of his bodies. So Adolfo and his lover, two lovers, the two disciples from the beginning, and Sarah, ran and hid in a motel, and eventually they found him, and he had one of the guys shoot him in the face, and that guy also committed suicide. Sarah was arrested and given life. Now, I don't like doing cult leaders because I believe everything they do is for themselves, and this is what happened. Adolfo eventually started doing for himself, but it was at the beginning when the Polaro made him give up his soul that I believe he became something else. I think his soul or pride or whatever was still in there trying to take over. So let me explain it this way. And I've heard this and I've read this in a book called The Exorcist Interview. And it was given to me by one of the demon insiders, Aaron. And what it says is, even when you allow a demon in you, you are still in control of your spirit. You can still cast that demon out even if you allowed them in. Now the demon's going to tell you it's not allowed, but it is, because it's under the grace of God. I think he wasn't praying to God for God to help him. I think what he was doing was trying to take control of the demon and have the demon do what he wanted. Now for me, I believe he was fighting with the demon spiritually to be in control of his own body. That's the only reason I'm doing this one. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, I believe, was possessed, but he was also trying to take control of the demon. Now, my question is this. If you're trying to control a demon, what's that demon going to do? Is he going to mess up your plans like this happened? Is he going to go along with it? You're talking about a deity that has been around for a long time. Now, remember that I said in Palomayombe, they have curses that will get you divorced, will cause death, will cause bankruptcy, will cause all this stuff. How do we know that a curse isn't just the demon doing what somebody is asking, or is doing it just to prove to the human that he thinks he has power? Because there's one thing about demons that people don't remember, and that these demons can't physically harm us, but they are smarter than us, because that's all they do is learn how to manipulate, how to lie, how to find our weakness. And this is what they prey on. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. Again, I wanted to thank Jacob Bernard for his comments. And thank you, Aaron, for the book. Loved it. And thanks to you guys for listening. It's been fun doing this show, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can. So, with that, I will talk to you all next week. Have a good week. Take care. Don't forget to subscribe to the Demon Inside podcast on any podcast platform. A new episode of the Demon Inside will be released every week. Let us know what you think of the episode on all our social media platforms. If you have any questions or comments, go to thedemoninsidepodcast@gmail.com or click on the link down below. We would love to hear from you. And to become a Demon Insider, go to our website, thedemoninsidepodcast.com. We thank you for listening and hope you will join us next week for a new Demon Inside podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends. I am John Venom, and I'll see you next time. If I don't get possessed. The Demon Inside was written and created by James Porter. It is a production of Venomous Entertainment. Background music is by Lucas King. And the title song, Demon Inside, was produced by Rice Pulver, composer lyricist Peter Shelley, and performed by Conjure One.